I'm turning off my cell phone and would like to welcome everybody to our June 5th Planning and Zoning Commission meeting. The first item on our agenda is the approval of the minutes from our May 1st meeting. Any corrections that need to be made? If not, I will accept a motion.
I move we accept the minutes as presented.
I've got a motion to approve the minutes as submitted. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Any further? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say nay. Motion passes unanimously. Come on in, Jack would not have voted on that anyway. He was not at the last meeting. So next item on the agenda, we're going to go ahead and flip-flop a little bit and put old new business and our 11:50-11 first, since this will be a long meeting. So first item on the agenda is SD 2136 Old Battles Village Phase 6. Request for a one-year extension.
Nothing really to report here. They are under construction, so we support this request. If y'all have any questions, we'll be happy to answer them. And I believe Larry's here. Nope, you are not. I don't see anybody here with that application. But
All right. This is not a public hearing, correct?
That's correct.
Right. Commissioners, we normally do a one-year carte blanche as long as it's under construction. Any concerns about that? If not, I'll accept a motion.
I'll move to grant the extension for 1 year.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any further discussion?
Is this the first extension?
Yes, it is. Any more further discussion? In that case, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say nay. Motion passes unanimously. Next item on the agenda, Windmill Professional Park, MOP request of the applicant for a 6-month extension for the final plat approval.
okay, and I don't think they'll actually need 6 months on this one, but this one is Larry. For his, he's here if you have any questions, but we do. It's almost all built. There's a little bit of green space requirements. You can see the buildings, parking, all the infrastructure's in. Just need a little bit of time to finish up the last little bit.
Okay.
And it is also the first extension.
All right. Commissioners?
Nope.
Any questions? If not, I'll accept a motion.
I move we grant the extension for the final plat approval of Windmill Professional Park.
Second.
I've got a motion and a second to grant a 6-month extension. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say nay. Motion passes unanimously. Next item, SD 2311 Myrick Place, a discussion of sidewalk installation.
Good evening. Mike Jeffries, City of Fairhope. So this was a case that we heard at the April meeting. This was Myrick Place, 2311. There on Estella. The applicant provided a 15-foot sidewalk easement, and the subdivision was approved with the condition that sidewalks be installed along Estella Street. They have since submitted a letter from the arborist supporting the easement only in lieu of installing the sidewalks there due to the location of the trees. A copy of the plat, just kind of as a refresher of where this is. It is one lot off of Greeno on the west side of the road. The applicant provided, we have Seth Moore and I believe Mr. Myrick with us here tonight to help answer some questions and go over their request in more detail. Some images supplied by the applicant. I think one solution that they have proposed, and I have a copy of that in here as well, is doing some striping of a sidewalk area along this curb line that you see looking west from the east lot line of Lot 1, the image on your left. And an image of looking back down the street next to the right-of-way where the sidewalk would go. You can see the trees in the image there. Again, this is an image I took from Google Earth looking west towards the properties. It's three lots now, and one possible solution is installing sidewalks on the opposite side of the street. Now, this would also require review and discussion with Richard Johnson Public Works Director. It could also require additional engineering for drainage, crosswalk locations, proposing a sidewalk, or another option is proposing a sidewalk plan that provides internal connectivity through the development. Those were just some ideas staff had. This was the proposed plan, received this late this afternoon with those other images. And this is a proposed 5-foot walkway that would be within that 15-foot sidewalk easement. And again, that was a painted 5-foot wide walkway. But we have Seth Moore. Mr. Murray, if you guys want to get up and discuss what your options are, what you're thinking about doing.
Yes, thank you. I'm Seth Moore with Moore Surveying. As you can see on this photo right now, in one of the other ones, without doing any disturbing of the ground around those oak trees with the roots that are already on top of the ground being cut by the lawnmowers as they go along, we could easily come in there and paint like you would a crosswalk across a street, a walkway within that asphalt area that's already existing, which is within that 15-foot easement. As he said, the arborist mentioned that if we do put that sidewalk in there 2 feet, 3 feet off the edge of the curb, then we're going to be cutting into the major roots of those oak trees. And there's some pretty good sized oak trees and a couple of cypress in that area. If y'all have any questions, I'd be glad to answer.
So what's going to happen where that painted sidewalk stops?
On the east side,
On the west side?
I'm sorry, yeah, on the west side, well, what I have envisioned is they're going to build a building, most likely just like they already have, where they're going to have an entrance and come back out, do the same, continue the same thing on along the asphalt and curbing.
I mean, that portion in Lot 1, they could build a sidewalk there.
Yes, they could build a sidewalk there, yes, sir. And we could angle it down, come back in when that building is built and change the little bit of the striping to connect up with that sidewalk along the front property line.
Yeah. Commissioners, any questions?
Yeah, Mr. Moore, so as it's drawn, the sidewalk extends by 30% of Lot 1, and you say that would be built in the future when something is built on that lot, or why does that not extend to the end of that lot so that it becomes more public access when somebody wants to build from the west to the east?
It is a 15-foot utility sidewalk easement, according to the plat. And so when they build that building on Lot 1, then they can put that concrete in, sidewalk in. And of course, not extending it straight on that way. What I envision is they come back and move it closer to the road. There is one oak tree, but it's heavily damaged and would not
There's one oak
impede.
tree on Lot 1?
Yes, on Lot 1.
I think, I can't speak for the other commissioners. I don't have a problem since this is going back retroactive, and there are a number of trees there that, were saved when they originally did that, first portion of the construction and put there, and you hate to go back and hurt landscaping when it's there. But to me, if you stripe it, it ought to stop it, go over Lot 2 and 3, and then at Lot 1, then actually have a sidewalk go, across the front of Lot 1.
I would say a sidewalk that would start where that driveway starts. Because if we could go back a couple of pictures, I've got a picture. Well, that's at the beginning. And I was trying to see which one I did. Where I was standing. That's going back the other way. Do the arrows.
Yeah, arrows back and
okay, if you see in the first one on the left, that's me standing at between lot 1 and 2, looking back to the east, and you have the driveway existing there. What I would propose, if we could, is after that driveway, start the concrete sidewalk, or you'd have to bust up all that entranceway to build the sidewalk. What I would do is come to that, where that curb is on the left-hand side of the picture, and then angle the painting of the striping to where the sidewalk would begin, which is on the west side of that turn-in that you have there, which if you look on lot 1, there is a ingress egress to Stella Street. Is you would start your sidewalk at that western edge of that asphalt and go to the property line when they construct the building on lot 1.
So I'm just trying to follow, are we painting grass? Is this what we're talking about?
No.
Like-
There is asphalt.
No, on the first part, when you're talking about painting,
Okay, see the left picture right there?
See the left picture? There's
They're
a
talking
curb
about
that goes all the way
They're
down.
talking about painting a sidewalk where that curb on
Mm-hmm.
the left would be the end of a 5-foot painted area. And there you'd have a 5-foot painted area, basically up against that curb.
It would look like, you know how you do the white painting when you cross a street? It'd be that same thing running parallel to the street from the east line of lot 1 going all the way past the common line between lot 1 and lot 2. And then when they build on lot 1, kind of like you do a residence most of the time, you build the sidewalk at that time.
Yeah, just draw it right on that.
I really appreciate every option we have. And there is a challenge here, but I do wonder if this is, we have this condition a few places in town, and it gives us heartburn in front of Ace Hardware, where you have cars backing into a crosswalk or a walking path. I'd at least like to explore Mr. Jeffrey's idea of, could we put a sidewalk on the other side of the street? There may be some challenges there that we don't know about, but at least a big portion of that area is flat, easy to do. I think it also is a perfect area for maybe the city or some other entity, wink, wink, Lee, to help us come in and maybe make a connection to the sidewalk that's on Greeno Road. Is just a thought. I'd at least like to explore that option before we commit to this, because this is a condition we're trying to get rid of around town. It's also right in front of Provision.
Right.
And,
Well, yeah, and you've got other, if we're talking a public sidewalk, you've got ADA issues with cross slope,
That's what
you
I'm
have
thinking.
surface roughness, and one of the things we battle during home construction is sidewalks have to be laid out first, and then your ramp up, your cut from the road has to ramp up to that. What we often see is the ramp up for the drive, and then the sidewalks hit it, and it's tilted the wrong way. So laying them out correctly from the beginning, we have a kind of a clean slate
Yeah.
on the south side of the road and the topography looks like it would work pretty good to be able to do it over there. And doing this and interfering with the traffic and cars backing out into an area where you're directing pedestrians, that's just, the situation we have in front of Fairhope Hardware has come up multiple times.
I do know that across the street, there are 2 manholes that are within 2 feet of the curbing there.
Okay.
Within that stretch. That would be one thing that I do know that
Okay.
would be a hindrance.
And Seth, I'm just curious if you've had a chance to look how much right-of-way we have over there. If we can meander a sidewalk through if we have enough right-of-way.
They've got a silt fence up right now. I don't know if they had a project that they were gonna do, is the reason why they had the silt fence up.
Yeah, I think that was before, I think that silt pit's been there for my time. I think that was the one they clear cut without
Okay.
permission, if I'm not mistaken. Is that correct, Eric?
Well, it's still
Correct.
sitting up, and I would assume it's on the property line,
Okay.
which if it is, there's not much. If there's 10 feet, I'd be surprised.
Yeah, now this,
Yeah, that's up by McDonald's. You can't even see down that.
Yeah. But you
Where
can
the
see it
wooded
almost a
area
de
is.
facto footpath there where it's
I'm
been
sure
worn
people
out.
have been walking.
Yeah. And we don't have any sidewalks on Estella on either side.
Right.
Mr. Moore,
Yes, sir.
can I ask another question?
Yes, sir.
real quick, Mr. Chairman, if I may?
Sure.
And also, Mr. Myrick, if there were, hypothetically, if there was a sidewalk built on the south side of the road as opposed to the north side of the road, would you be opposed to that?
No, the only concern, the only reason I'm concerned is because I'm not opposed to a sidewalk, I'm just opposed to possibly killing some of my trees, that's the only thing,
Yeah.
that's my only
Well,
concern.
if we move it across the street, and really, so what Hunter was saying, as a council member, I can't see to commit funds to that. I mean, everybody in town wants a sidewalk in front of my house, I promise you. But that is a connector, and then a part of another organization is we would have a push for sidewalks, and I know some others being constructed. And it just allows me to seek funds, some funding for that, and just if it was even a possibility.
It definitely looks like you got more room across the street just from that picture, for sure.
Well, and then you get, you know, as Eric points out, we tend to gloss over these things, but when you have ADA issues, I mean, it's sometimes not so simple just to build a concrete sidewalk. You don't have the room or the topography to do it, so may have it on the other side.
Yeah, you probably have it a lot easier on the other side than you would the north side. Because there is a grade, like I said, in several areas, you're coming up to the tree level, and it's a good 1.5 feet, which would not meet, if you did it on the grade, that would not meet ADH.
Well, regardless of what's decided in here, I think I can just look at it anyway. I can see if it's even an option.
Yeah.
I can ask the question.
Yeah. That other side would be a great place to have a sidewalk.
If you're wanting to do connectivity across, if it's on the north side, you're going to cross 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 driveways of the houses. On that south side, you've got directly across from you, and then there's that 645 linear foot semi-developed lot that dead ends right into the sidewalk at Ingleside. South side would be much easier to do.
And we also, now, where this photo was taken, if you come to the crosswalk, that island kind of pushes in, so we'd have to bring it in, have a crosswalk into that entrance, but then you're lining up right there with the mixed-use trail on Greeno. It'd be a little harder to make that connection on the north side as well, so. I think it does work, and that I don't think is Mr. Myrick or Seth's obligation, certainly, but it would tee up for a project. The kind of wild card was we were looking at, in that undeveloped lot that's grown up, we don't know what's right there in the right of way, whether that's a ditch that's covered up or, that's some unknowns at this time. It doesn't look like that. It's actually
Yeah, it's not
grown
as
out.
clean.
Right.
That's what I was saying.
It
If
may
you
be
look
flat
down-
as that, but.
Yeah. If you look down there where you can see that little sign that's on the west side of that cut through to Agave, those trees come out pretty much within 8 to 10 feet from the edge of the curb.
But I'd say that's what, 20-foot street? We probably, depending on where the center line ratchets out, we could have as much as 15
It's,
feet.
it's a
On that
50-foot
side.
right-of-way.
Yeah, it's 50 foot.
It's a
We
50
put
foot.
it
Yeah,
in
it's
the
50
center
feet.
when
Okay.
we did Estella.
So then you got 15 foot off the curb for a right-of-way to
And I
work
think
within.
you do have a ditch,
I think there probably is some sort of a ditch there. just
because it does
where it go?
drain back to that other drain, which comes back through that.
Why don't we do this? They've got an approved motion to do it with the sidewalks. So why don't you give us 30 days to see, to the next meeting and see if there's a, kind of what options that staff would suggest for us.
Eric, do you recall, as before my time, there was a proposed development out here? Do you know if
You're
there was
talking
a
on that wooded
survey
lot?
on that one?
On the wooded lot to the south?
Was there a survey on that property?
I'd have to go back. That's been a while, but way back in the day, it was like in the 80s or 90s, there was a strip center approved for that property.
Well,
And
then
then
there
they
was a-
came in and cleared it. And I don't know if that has sunset, if that,
Well, there was a hotel approved as well at some point. I don't know if it ever made it to, but
No, I didn't hear about
do you
that.
recall?
No.
Do you ever recall
I
doing
don't
a
think
survey
so.
out there? Okay.
No,
I
that
just
was
remember
done
they-
by Rester and Coleman
Yeah.
years ago.
Yeah, I just remember they came in and stripped that lot and then gave us a set of plans for a strip center right there that eventually did not get built after they had stripped the lot.
Right,
So,
right. We can take a look and get as much as we can. It might be a little difficult to get some things, but would you be willing to help us?
Sure.
See if there's any measurements where exactly, how much room we got?
Yeah.
And we
Like I
can take
said,
a
I know
look.
when we did Estella Place, which is west of this, and single tax with City of Fairhope put in Estella Street, we staked it in the center of the right-of-way. I do know that.
We'll kind of figure out what's in that 15 feet off the curb and see how difficult it may be.
Sounds good? All right, thank you, Seth.
Thank you.
Let me ask a question, and just as an option, so before we get here, because I know we can't commit to a project, paying for a project in the planning commission. But if we do find out there's some drainage ditches that would require a little bit more infrastructure, would it be acceptable to use kind of the bonding amount for Mr. Myrick's portion of this linear feet times whatever the sidewalk costs are? And then we can maybe look at drainage whenever we're ready to complete a project? Would that be a potential solution?
Sounds good to me. I mean, I don't know what the guy next to you would say.
Might ask Chris.
We'll have to look at it. Okay.
Yeah, let's go with 30 days on that. Would be great. Thank you, Seth.
Thanks.
All right, thank you.
All right, next item on the agenda is UR 2306, AT&T 115211 reviews. We've got one for Song Grove, and then 2307 for Fairfield and Founders. Who is presenting?
There's a back, I'm forgetting the back is hurting. These next two are pretty standard, so as you know, we will go through these pretty quickly. Just showing you kind of the area of where they're proposing under this permit to install. We've reviewed, we do not have any questions, so it's pretty standard. These are the same conditions. We don't have any new conditions. We'll typically talk about them if we do, but these are the same 10 conditions when we have these utility reviews. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them, but otherwise, this is pretty standard.
they're going to do door hangers?
Yes.
Yeah. River Oaks is pretty standard. West Chase Court is tight.
Right.
That's a lot, that's really dense.
And so everyone else is familiar with that. We do require door hangers. They have to, before they start working, they put, and we actually will call and check that number, make sure it's actually somebody that can answer a question about this project directly with AT&T. So that happens. Yeah. And before they get started with work, so they have to do that. So there is someone, if a resident has a question, they can get an answer of what it's going to look like.
That one especially, though, could be disruptive to a lot of that stuff in there, because everybody parks on the street, everybody parks on the driveway, on the sidewalks.
Yep, and if,
Yeah.
just familiar where that is, it is pretty tight. That's one of the, I think those were the R3 PGH
Yeah.
at the time. So real tight. But no other question there, so we do recommend approval with our standard 10 conditions for these 115211 reviews.
All right, UR 2306, do I have,
Move the
Any
grant
questions?
request.
I have a motion to grant the request? Do I have a second?
Second.
Oh, is that subject to staff recommendations, Jack?
Subject to staff recommendation.
All right, do I have a second?
Second.
Any further? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say nay. All right, thank you. 2307, Fairfield and Founders. Anything You need to add to that?
Nothing, just there's the location shown in purple where that's going to be in place. We have the same 10 conditions with our recommendation for approval.
Do I have a motion?
Move to approve the request 2307 with the staff recommendation.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any further? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say nay. The next two are both being withheld to the next meeting.
Yes, sir.
We had some staff questions on the next two with MediaCom, so they decided to wait until the next meeting, so we'll be seeing that again. Next item on the agenda, IR 2302, informal review for Hilltop PUD Lot 29.
I'll introduce this real quick. And Trey Jenwright's here with the applicant, so if you have any questions. But this is Hilltop subdivision. It initiated with a unzoned in the county's residential subdivision. Really, there was no use determined but it is mostly residential. With the approval of Phase 2, they actually annexed into the city within a PUD. The PUD site plan's on the screen. If you look at the bottom right, that lot 29 was a commercial with some limited use. And if you see the line that parallels the road, this was something that really wasn't even discussed. We just didn't think about it. Nobody thought about it. That was a remnant almost of the highway construction setback from the unzoned and unincorporated subdivision. There's a little bit more, and there's one plan that's kind of going to be tentatively shown tonight, and there is another one as well that meets the 100-foot setback. But the real question here, we'd have to amend a PUD because that 100-foot setback made its way into the PUD as approved by City Council. That has to be amended to do anything else. But that's where the conversation is. I'm going to let Trey really just speak about the building, but I do want to flip to the end. There's some wetlands. I think moving up to the front is something we agree with. And I'm going to save that for a second, but when you look south of this property, just immediately south, there's buildings 30 feet off the road. You look at some other subdivisions right there, they're also 30 feet off the road, so, and some even closer. So we are in agreement. The informal review here is really to look at the building and before they make an application to amend the PUD, because that'll come back to you, but ultimately go to the City Council for approval. And Trey, you want to add anything on the actual layout and building?
Yeah, good evening. Trey Jenwright, J Consulting. So what we're coming to you before this evening is a couple things that I think are of interest to this site. One being it's a PUD, so with the PUD, it gives the city maybe some abilities to do something you wouldn't be able to do on another piece of property that was just a straight zone, commercial zoning. So this has a commercial use allowed in the PUD, but we really didn't get into any kind of design standards or setback criteria or anything of how we want that to look. As the developer, Mr. Tickle, is moving forward with this, now we're starting to figure out how we want it to feel, what do we want it to look like. And this has the potential. I mean, you're down there by the Grand Hotel, the golf course, you're coming into town. You know, I think Hilltop's turned out to be a really nice development in there. Has the potential to be I don't want to use a cornerstone. I think maybe Battles Road's a good cornerstone, but let's just say hypothetically it's a cornerstone area as you start moving yourself into town. How would you want that area to build out coming back toward town? And so with there being just opportunity for right now regular zoning, if we want to try to put some special design criteria on it, now would be a good time to look at it. So we wanted just to bring that to you as an informal conversation before we went with a full-blown on request. And so by doing that, we're wanting to look at a couple different things. One of them would be the highway construction setback. You know, it's an area that is set aside predominantly in unzoned areas, county right-of-way, and it's for them reserving right-of-way for future roadway build-outs in there. 100-foot setback in there. Some would probably argue it's a little bit large for this corridor. We don't ever see that road being built out to a 4-lane highway. At least I don't know that we would want it, but maybe it will. But hypothetically, that may not be the best idea for the area. It's the main corridor coming into downtown. I personally think it would be a good pedestrian zone to try to orientate that. Some sidewalks are already started out there. We've got it on the Battles project to the south of it, so it's coming through Hilltop, and it will ultimately continue back into town. So with that in thought, why not look at maybe trying to bring these buildings up closer to the pedestrian thing, orientate that, activate this more of that tone. And so what we've asked Walcott Adams to do is, I don't know if y'all have got that, is that in your slideshow, but these renderings kind of give you a taste of what that would look like. Yeah, so that would give you a taste of what that will look like. Now, what's shown in there really lightly, there's some trees in front of those buildings. We went back and forth. Do we turn the trees on so you can actually see the trees, or do we turn them on so you can see the building? But regardless of the point, the intent is that the building would be shaded by either existing vegetation or replanted vegetation. I think that the direction would be more of a 30A feel. As you're going through Grayton Breach, or in that zone where we're kind of setting that tone where it's vehiculars are parking to the side and to the rear of the structure, and the buildings are actually pulled to the road. This is the floor plan that meets the criteria, the uses that are in the PUD. So we're not talking about uses; those are already kind of there, but really just talking about building placement and kind of maybe the Planning Commission's ideas on that. If we kind of set a tone here, then naturally we would, that'd be an opportunity to kind of build off of it as you move your way into town and out of town. So, and also, we're looking at some projects across the street, and that would kind of help us. How do we set that up and kind of set this zone up? So that's really where I'm at, and just wanted to kind of get your feedback. So thank you.
First, I apologize for being late. I got held up. But I know we're not talking about uses, but when Jason first came in, at one point they were talking about, possibly a community building or a guest house or, hospitality. I mean, I'm just curious with the I'm curious about the uses with the form. If there's anything, it may just be too amorphous.
Nothing has been proposed to be changed. There was no uses, but there was limits of uses. Anything that kind of gave us heartburn, I think they removed. And they even had some 2-story and kind of 3-story. It was weird the way the land fell, and pushing it all the way back toward the wetland buffer starts getting in some trickier situations. So I don't think we're really discussing any further limitations on the uses at this point.
I think what's in there, and these projects all run together, so please excuse me if I state wrong, but I think it's probably maybe a market in there, a coffee shop kind of use. There may be an art gallery in the back there, okay. And then maybe some short-term rental type deals upstairs. So
I was really curious about the second floor, because that's
Yeah.
not a typical commercial space. And
And it may be even be open aired up there, so.
Yoga studio that people
I think it even allowed just long-term rentals, to a couple of residential or something in the PUD. So,
But the front that you're looking at there, I believe that's going to be like a market, a sandwich shop, maybe a wine, something, cheese shop, something like that, kind of.
I think it's any location, there's a lot of potential. My just off the cuff thought, since this is an informal review of just what instantly hits my head, is the closer you bring it to the road, probably the less scale I'd like to see on the building. The further back, the more I wouldn't want to see anything too imposing. And what you have drawn with the trees, looks, decent to me, but I'm just saying the closer you bring it, probably the more concerned I'd be about, what kind of height and scale are you looking at on that building.
Well, I mean, I think as this structure's drawn right here, it's no different than any residential structure you would see in town. I mean, it's the same height and characteristic of it. It's got the similar feel, so I think 35 feet or whatever the current code is, that's where you're at.
The setback has already been established there for most of that area.
And this follows, should we flip one more, just looking at the patterns
moving, but one of the key, that's TR district right below that. One of those key components, they have a 30-foot landscape buffer. So it's not just a setback. So that falls right in line with, I think, the tree coverage along that road follows the same patterns.
So if we thought that the planning commission may be supportive of something like that, and then ultimately the city council would be supportive of something like that, then I think we would try to tighten up the design criteria so that it would have some teeth in it, specifics to this layout, so that you could not only hold them to the fire on this project, but then as you go forward, we're trying to create this tone in there. So if you see things you like or see things you don't like, I think, I would love to hear it, because I think it's important to kind of maybe set this area up for success in the future. It's a thought.
Obviously, de-emphasizing the parking to the side or to the back is a good thing.
Yeah.
That-
Okay.
that-
Well, if you don't have anything else, I guess we'll leave it at that. We got a big night tonight.
Yes, we do.
Thank y'all.
Thank you, Trey. Next item on the agenda is SD 2319, public hearing to consider the request of applicant Trey Cordy, acting on behalf of owner Cena Inc. for multiple occupancy project preliminary and final plat approval for Belle V. Property is located at the intersection of Fairhope Avenue and North Bayview Street.
Thank you. I did want to, before I get into this, I do want to address one comment that I think you received via email, questioning whether a associated tree committee meeting was addressed properly. Our city clerk was on vacation last week, but she got in this morning and checked, and it was advertised as appropriate for that style of meeting. So we did vet that and got an answer on that. But now kind of jumping into the summary, this is a 4-unit MOP. Multiple occupancy is reviewed based on our subdivision regulations. This body, the Planning Commission, is the authority having jurisdiction over that, so this will not go to City Council. The subject property is currently zoned B3B, which is a tourism resort district that allows short-term rentals, bed and breakfast, like commercial, also single family. It is currently 2 historic lots, and the intent is to create 4 condominium lots with the intention of putting 4 single-family homes on the property. The zoning is on the map is on the left. This is on the corner of Fairhope Avenue and North Bayview Street, and the aerial is on the right. This property is included within our historic survey. Subject property shown on the right, and the report for this property is on the left as a contributing home. We do not have the preservation of ordinances in place for this, so the preservation is at the discretion of the property owner. By receiving this application, I think that's a stance on the property owner. So we've reviewed this per the subdivision regulations. But lots, or MOPs with 4 or fewer units are eligible to submit an application for both simultaneous preliminary and final approval. The site plan is on the screen below. It does show 4 buildings, so the common areas, the interior, private open space, if you will, the courtyard shown in yellow, and the shared drive on the north side of the property. Parking, the zoning ordinance does require 2 parking spaces per resident. That would mean 8 spaces on site. So the applicant, to avoid, and I'll flip back, to avoid removing, originally the drive went through where this street tree is, and parking was provided here, but the driveway was moved to avoid that tree. But that took out the 2 parking spaces there, so the applicant has proposed to install 2 parking spaces in the right-of-way. Would have to get credit for 2 other spaces that are nearby or provide bike parking. That ratio is allowed at a 2-to-1 rate, so the Planning Commission may grant the credits for those on-street parking. I highlighted those because those are an action item. If approved, the parking pads on North Bayview will be pervious and approved by the City of Fairhope Public Works Department. There was some already agreement that those would be impervious pavers if approved. The utilities are all provided by Fairhope. This is the utility plan presented. The electric department will require a 10 by 15-foot easement for a electrical transformer if approved. Drainage plan was conducted by Jason Estes with Dewberry. It's basically collected as part of the MOP infrastructure in underground pipes that will feed into a drainage basin. And they've met all of our subdivision regulations. We will require, if approved, all the homes to have gutters and tie those gutters into that system. Just a couple of notes here. Grading and BMP plan will be required for the permit, for the land disturbance permit to install that drainage infrastructure. There is a little bit of a conflict between, and I'm going to get into this a little bit later, but the site plan shows 65% lot coverage on each of the condo lots, where the verbiage of the condominium plat shows 75%. So there's a little conflict there, which one's rules, but we're kind of saying here at 65% unless we change it and make sure the drainage is accounting for those rooftops. We do require as a MOP, it's a subdivision, so we do require an O&M plan that shows how to maintain that drainage system. We have not received that at this time. And there is in that drainage basin, which is essentially a wall filled with gravel, and it recesses down, it allows the water to collect and then kind of bubble up and not cause problems off property. There was a proposal, and we saw some ideas. I think it was a good idea in this situation too. So it's not just a gravel drainage basin. You can actually incorporate fountains or sculptural elements. I think that was a good idea. Final designs we haven't approved, but I think the concept is admirable. Per Richard Johnson, since we do have this drainage plan, this comes up quite a bit on what we call the halo easements. So the drainage easements around the property, we know where every utility's coming in. We know what the drainage is doing, so we do not require those halo easements. There is the 4 lots where the inline drainage is and the drainage basin on the corner of Fairhope Avenue and North Bayview. Kind of a quick detail of what that looks like. You have I think this is only a 30-inch wall, but this is showing the subterranean, what that looks like, where the drain line comes in. It pours here instead of running right off the property onto our right-of-way. This was the landscape plan submitted. You see the drainage area and the trees being removed. I'm sorry, this was a site plan with nope, that was the landscape plan. Green space meets, this is small, 0.4 acres, so there's not too much green space required. It's 20%, but with the 20-foot preserved on Fairhope Avenue and the 10-foot on Bayview, they met that requirement of 20%. Now, the landscape and trees, this is kind of where we have the biggest contention, I think, if we call it that. There are 2 very large magnolia trees on site, 30 inches and 36 inches in diameter. The applicant did recommend or did request to remove those trees. Jamie Rollins with our horticulture supervisor denied the removal. You all saw those letters in your packet. That was, Jamie can consult with the tree committee on that. The tree committee did vote to recommend allowing the 2 trees to be removed, condition that 2 12-inch live oaks are planted in the North Bayview Street right-of-way. While we were there was mention of a 22-inch or a cedar tree also that may be in the right-of-way. They did not recommend approval of that one, really wasn't discussed. And we did see a informal review of a project on this site, but it also included the property to the west. It was a 30-unit hotel. They provided a tree survey as well. There's just some conflicts between the two surveys. The trees shown in yellow were not included on the plan with this application. You know, there's, one of the magnolia trees were shown 10 feet away. Jamie went out Friday. He said it's definitely not 10 feet away, but we've got two surveyors, you know, surveying the same tree and they're 20 feet off. There's some confusion there. He did measure, I think this tree was a oak species. I believe I would say is laurel oak. And this is a cedar tree in very poor health. So this is not worth saving here. But there is a cedar tree here that's partially in the right of way. It is a protected tree. And I believe there were two crepe myrtles here in the right of way. It was also slated to be removed. And I didn't have this one. There is a large water oak here on the property line that was slated to be removed. Because we don't really know where those trees were, I mean, there's tree credits, there's mitigation, there's...
Isn't there supposed to be a landscape plan when you get your application that shows all of this?
Yes, that's what I did mention in the plan. We did not, this was the landscape plan submitted. It's actually a slightly earlier version of this. So those trees were not on here. You know, and we're kind of saying, hey, we actually need that. That's in part of the tree ordinance, so.
I mean, do trees really matter in that area much? I mean, do we really care about trees much? Why not just take them all down and go lot line to lot line? I mean, get a lot bigger building there.
Well, you know,
Not
there
get
was
leaves on your
some,
car.
we've debated, and we did confirm today that Lee and I neither like to be wrong, so, but I am right in this situation. Heritage trees are protected in the CBD, so we don't allow clearing of trees even in the CBD lot line to lot line. I'm a fan. I agreed with saving the two magnolias, but some of these others that are not there, they do not have any mitigation, so I think that's one of the challenges here is to prove something that, and I get to the fine, you know, when we don't know the answer. I think they can be preserved. We can deny the removal of those trees, and the only recourse is appealing to our court, not the tree committee. So theirs was the revised tree protection and removal. I think every tree on site is removed, and then two crepe myrtles in the right of way, based on this plan. Sidewalks, there is a sidewalk on Fairhope Avenue. North Bayview does not have a sidewalk. There's very little room inside the property, so there's not a sidewalk shown, nor is there an easement provided. Just if the planning commission is willing to allow both of those to go without either the installation of a sidewalk or a easement provided for a future sidewalk, then that will require a waiver. So it did not get, before we approve a final plan, we did not advertise that waiver this month. So garbage collection is easy.
How will that sidewalk fit in with those two parking spaces?
It's a challenge. Could it happen? Absolutely, but you know, we have sidewalks and parking around. Now, it gets a little trickier when you've got the trees, and there's, the landscape plan did not include the 12-inch oak trees as the tree committee recommended, so that's kind of figuring all those things out is the landscape plan that we really need to see. How can that work? You know, let's say the buildings, you know, by right, B3B allows certain uses. I think it was the intent to use these as single family, which is allowed, but so are other uses. We've talked about this before. Short-term rentals are allowed here. We actually encourage it. It's something that we designed by our zoning ordinance. I do not recommend allowing things like covenants to restrict that as a single-family use to try to override zoning. There's some allowed by right uses. So if approved, we would recommend some limitations on that on the plat. Some are by right, some are approved via Board of Adjustment. There would be a MOP plat required at final plat. It's not finalized. We need to have an engineer of record record that or put a signature block on that and their certification. And just some of the standard notes. This was the proposed MOP plat. This is a little bit more what I call out in the next one as a condominium plat that really draws out the land condos. Unless we know exactly where the buildings are, I would not recommend putting those on the condominium plat. You got to change those every time a building moves a foot to accommodate something. There also would be a administratively approved replat required to combine the lots as we discussed last month in the informal review. So we get to the first question here. It's simultaneous preliminary and final approval. I cannot recommend to you that we give final approval on that. That's pretty, at least personally, I feel pretty adamant about that. We don't have enough information. Those finals are ready. They're kind of 90% ready usually to submit a building permit and start the infrastructure and construction. So we've got some, the landscape planning into of itself is we don't know where the trees are, which ones can be saved, which ones as a city entity, we're going to say you can't remove those. So the domino effects that goes, if we say save the cedar tree, the drainage basin has to move. That changes the engineering plan. We're not ready for a final, and I gave some examples there. So we do recommend denial for that preliminary and final approval of this project. Planning Commission may condition preliminary approval with conditions, and we made a list. We can talk them through if you want to. I highlighted things that actually require some review. So parking and sidewalks, they need action if you intend to approve a preliminary review of this. But it's kind of what I have. If you have any questions, the applicant Trey Cordy and Wendy I believe are here as well. If you have any questions for them. This is the first one on our agenda that is on the agenda for final. We do not have we do not meet within 30 days, so standard comments that you normally make. Public hearing is the application presented to you. If that is open, I would say you need to act. We do not have the luxury of tabling a final plat one time without the applicant's request. So with that said, I'll
All right. Thank you, Hunter. Trey, would you like to present at this time?
Okay. All right, Trey Cordy. So we're proposing to build 4 single-family houses on the 2 lots. The reason it's condos is because the city ordinances and regulations don't allow us to subdivide into just 4 lots. So that's how we went with there. And since single-family lots, houses are approved, that's where we went. We originally, this was a hotel that I had no part of. That was the prior owners or whoever was buying that. And one of the neighbors, the adjacent neighbors are here, and one of the things they had a big problem was all the garbage and all kinds of stuff was backed up to their house and stuff. So Wendy and I feel that this, in our beliefs, is a better use of this property, just 4 single-family residences rather than a large single building with offices downstairs and residences upstairs. That's our belief. Then we wanted to face all 4 units onto Fairhope Avenue. And in order to do that, and it allows one driveway along the back that feeds all of them, so there's not multiple driveways into each of these houses. There's just one, and it's actually exactly where the existing driveway to the house is today, so there wouldn't be any changes there. We had asked, like Hunter said, we had asked for one of the street trees to be removed. They said no. We said fine. removed the parking for one of the houses in order to do that, so we are asking for, we had originally asked for 2 spots, just, I guess, perpendicular, side by side to the house. We had a meeting and everybody with the city decided, no, it'd be better to do 2 parallel parking spots. We can put those, we had the meeting with the tree guys where the 2 live oaks are, so the live oaks would be in between those 2 parking spots and then one towards the corner there. We don't show, when we initially did this, the staff was not sure we needed sidewalks and stuff, but we don't have a problem by putting a sidewalk in along Bayview if that's needed. There's 20 feet between the paved road and the property line. So if we put a 12-foot parallel parking spot there, we still have 8 feet to put a sidewalk. And we can put a sidewalk basically right up against the property line. So that's not a problem. And that was one of the things that was on the approval. So let's get to I guess the biggest thing is the trees. There's 3 trees that were omitted, and they were omitted because at the time my surveyor, they were less than 20 inches, so we didn't put them on there. Recently, even on the other, the hotel site plan, you can see that was a list, that the one in the northeast corner was listed as a 19-inch oak, which is not under y'all's tree ordinance. That's fine. We'll leave that one. It's not a problem. It's a pretty tree. We can leave that one in the northeast corner. The other one that was omitted because it doesn't even have any limbs on it. It's a cedar that's just a kind of a stump. So we didn't add that because it wasn't really a tree. And then there's a cedar on the corner there. It's hard to tell, but it's about 50% in the right-of-way and 50% on the property. It might be a little bit more on the private property, but regardless, some of it does stick on the right-of-way. Not a problem. We'll leave that cedar. So there's no issues with the tree. Now, the issue that staff brought up with one of the magnolias being 10 feet off the property line is not correct. It's 34 and a half feet. I have absolutely no idea why that was brought up. I know it was labeled on that site plan, but you can just stand out there and see it. I mean, 10 feet's from me to you, Lee, and that tree is way in the back, and it's located exactly the where we show it on our plan. We've even double and triple checked that. Speaking of the 2 magnolias, there are, like Tunner said, there's 2 historical lots there side by side. They're both 66 feet wide and 132 feet deep. These 2 magnolia trees are literally in the center of that corner lot. That one tree is 34 and a half feet from the property line. Half of 66 feet is 33 feet. The other one is about 5 feet deeper in. So they're both essentially in that corner, right in the middle of that corner lot, which would make that corner lot completely useless. So that's one of the reasons we have asked to remove them. Then also one of the big magnolias is grown into the foundation of that house. It is adjacent to the house. The trunk is right up against the foundation. When that house is removed, it's going to probably kill that tree anyway, and that tree's leaning. So anyway, that's why I don't think there's a discrepancy of what's available for the trees or not, just because the reason they weren't located is because they weren't the correct size. But we will leave that laurel oak in the northeast corner regardless of the size. So that addresses the trees. The landscape plan. Yes, we accidentally forgot to add the 2 live oaks that were mitigation live oaks, and we will add those. That's not a problem. And they would be located one would be located between the 2 parallel parking spots, and one would be located towards, right after the parallel parking spot, but towards Fairhope Avenue. And that would be in line with the other 2 existing trees that are there that the driveway comes through. So it would be, I think, a nice addition for that street. and fill in that whole corner with the live oaks. When there's only thing that's there in that spot now is Hunter mentioned the crepe myrtles. It's just a mass of them. There's actually a water oak growing up through the middle of them. So it doesn't look, if y'all have been out there, it doesn't look good to me. So we would want to remove the crepe myrtles and then replace it with a 12-inch live oak. I think that's a legitimate trade-off there. The other part of the landscape plan is the only thing, okay, so the drainage structure on the corner, we had initially thought of we would put a wall bench height, about 19 inches high, so you could sit on it and be a nice area. Hunter and the staff said, well, we might be concerned about it being too close to the sidewalk. Somebody might fall over in it. So we said, okay, so what we're proposing is to build just a curb to keep the gravel in, and it's going to look just like, I had some pictures. We had some pictures at one of our meetings. I don't think they're on this. But it looks like it's a 15 by 15 area, so it would look just like your courtyard, just a gravel courtyard. You walk on in the middle of it. We're going to have a fountain. It's a recirculating fountain. It's not part of the gravel, and then 2 benches, so it's going to look like a nice little courtyard area with a fountain, and then flowers and landscaping all around it. So it would be a very nice landscape feature on the corner there. So no one even know it was a drainage structure at all. No, you wouldn't have any idea. One of the things the staff had said is that the drainage structure has to be complete before we can get final plat approval. Okay, so what Wendy and I would like to do is request that y'all approve a preliminary plat tonight, and then we will have to come in and build the drainage structure and come back and get the final plat once it's complete. So that would take care of the request for us asking for final and preliminary at the same time. We'll just ask for preliminary tonight and come back and get the final. The condos, like I said, the reason we did that was because there's no way to do just 4 lots like a subdivision. The site plan that was submitted was not part of an MOP submittal. I added that as a example of what we would do, and we're actually building something similar to this in Mobile, in DeTonti Square. I know it's Mobile, but we won an award for best new construction in downtown Mobile for that project. The architecture will be totally different. These will be more grand, more coastal, that would fit into Fairhope's architecture, not historical like we have done in downtown Mobile. We can change that up. So the condos, so this is a land condo, so I want to make this clear. We're doing a land condo. It's not a building condo, so it's not like our condo docs, we're going to show the buildings. It only shows a lot. So when you look at the MOP, it shows the outline a lot. It almost looks just real similar to a subdivision plat. So the MOP is correct. Hunter said that we need to have an engineer sign off on it. That's fine. The surveyor was going to sign off on it because there's no engineering component of it. But whatever, if y'all's regulations say an engineer has to sign on it rather than a surveyor, then that's fine. We can do that. But the MOP drawing should be complete, and the boundaries are as the condo docs would be as well. So I don't see any discrepancy there, unless I'm missing something. And I don't have the list in front of me, but there was a couple other conditions on,
Sidewalk waiver.
sidewalk waiver. Oh, okay. We covered the 2 parking spots. I asked, why we did that. One of the requirements was to meet with Eric. He and I met. He explained to me the conditions of the firewalls between the condo lines. They had no problem with that. We can work. That's not a big deal. We had already kind of anticipated that. We're not real excited about that where we cannot restrict it to single-family use, but we're not going to argue that point if that's what y'all want to do. We would prefer just to keep it single-family, but if y'all don't want to do that, that's not a problem. Let's see, there's a bunch of land, we still have to get the land disturbance permits and the right-of-way permits and the tree permits, and that's fine. The operation and maintenance plan, basically, that just says that the homeowners and the condo association is going to maintain the drainage. That's not a big deal. I do that all day long on my other subdivisions that I do. Obviously, we have no problem with the roofs to be guttered and tied into the drainage line. We're the ones who proposed that, same way we did over in Mobile. The easement for the electric department for the transformer, that is there on our property, so we don't disturb that one tree that is on the northwest corner. Not a problem with that. I don't know, I guess that's about it. Is there any questions that y'all have? Or any questions I could address from the public if they have
You don't
questions?
have a acceptable landscape plan, you don't have a preliminary MOP plan. I mean, what are we approving?
I do have a preliminary MOP plan. It's
Preliminary
complete.
MOP
It's
plan?
100% complete.
Preliminary MOP plat?
Yeah.
So we've never approved, MOP plats, we have show buildings. I mean,
Yeah.
when we're looking at courtyards, where drainage is going to run, you have to have a drainage plan. So the MOP plat, that's why in our staff report said, the MOP plat needs to show the buildings. Now, it's not a site plan. We're not looking at architectural elevations, things like that, but this
But
is
the
where the
drainage plan
roofs
has to be
are.
built based
Right.
on something.
So that's why I was recommending, as our ordinances allow, a condominium plat shows the land condominiums. So it's a combination, they're very similar documents. The engineering stamp on the MOP plat would say we're going to, everything's going to be built to design. That holds them accountable for monitoring the construction and ensuring that it's done to their design guidelines as our regulations require. The land condominium plat, is just the legal boundary of what can be sold to individual owners. So to answer the question, that was the distinction. It's in our report.
Well, I went step by step through y'all's guidelines, and it doesn't have anything in there about having the buildings shown anyway. Not only do y'all do this every day, but
But it does require a landscape plan.
and I have one.
By
But
a
it's not
landscape
by-
architect.
By a landscape
Right.
architect, not just a civil engineer.
Okay. I can have a guy stamp it tomorrow, Wednesday. One of the reasons I didn't do it is because I didn't know if y'all would approve this or not. And there's a lot of, it's like the condo dots. We haven't done the condo dots, it could cost $30,000. I'm not gonna spend $30,000 if y'all gonna disapprove those.
Well, the staff has been, in my opinion, I see the staff spending a lot of time on this, and with this many conditions and incomplete pieces, I hate that we're spending taxpayer dollars to review something that's not complete.
I don't understand what's not complete.
How many conditions are there on that list?
One of the conditions is an engineer's signature rather than a surveyor's signature.
Well, I just, being an engineer, you can't plan stamp. That engineer has to do the work in order to put his seal on it. He can't just take somebody else's work and sign.
But there's no engineering on this MOP plan. There's no construction required. It's,
Landscape architect.
Well, the drainage is required by our subdivision regulations, even when private, to be designed by an engineer when it's required. So
and
by
he
him-
did, and he signed off on it, and it's signed and sealed, and there's drainage calculations. I don't understand the problem there. It's right there.
Yeah, and the MO plat should reflect his, it has a big section that says, here's the certification that he will sign on that plat that gets recorded with probate. That's usually when we get the application, all that information is provided. So that is.
I mean, it's right there, the drainage plan. There's the construction drawing that's shown on there. He signed and sealed it. It's signed and sealed calculations, which is at the end of your, all,
We're not
at the
talking
end of the
about
deal.
drainage plan.
I mean, I don't understand what I'm missing at all. I just don't. I went through line by line, and we have every single thing that is required.
And I think some things are confused by the preliminary and final. I mean, it's very clear. The engineer shall perform the supervision of construction of anything they've designed. The final plat shall have the following engineer certification. And it lists exactly what language is there. That's something we do to ensure that those engineers have some reviews of their design so that a contractor just doesn't go build something completely opposite.
Let me ask y'all this. Obviously, I've done this for 30 years in this town. I understand how all this works. I understand we get approvals all the time. There'll be 1 or 2 or 3 conditions. Yeah, it's approved, but you need to have this note on the subdivision plat. Let's take a subdivision plat. You've got to, okay, you didn't show a sidewalk, but it's conditioned upon you putting the sidewalk in. I got that. I do that 30 years ago. I don't see any difference in here. So the question is, are y'all opposed to this, or, you know, is this a problem with the city to have this development done, or what? I'd like to ask that.
I think this is a tough one. You know, I think the city's tried to do a lot, you know, to help you, you know, with the plan, and I'm just questioning, and I like a lot of the aspects, and you do, you know, great projects, and I like a lot of the aspects of this. It's just, you know, your cousin Art, he used to sit down there where Jack's sitting, would always say, what we do for one, we have to do for the other, and we have to be very, you know, concerned about setting precedents. And on this one, you know, from the start, you know, the way this would be nice if it could be done is just subdivide the 2 lots into 4 lots, and then you got, you know, 4 lots. Well, it doesn't work that way because of this reason, this reason, and this reason. So then you know, try to say, well, let's try a condo program, and that gets around some issues, but then you've got other MOP issues, and, you know, you've got just issues of you know, sides of buildings on Bayview and parking on, you know, right-of-ways and heritage trees coming down. And it's just, overall, it's just, can you get 4 lots there is what the whole question is. I think 3 lots you could probably fit in pretty easily, but just getting that 4th lot is just, no matter how you cut it, you know, 3 lots, you could just subdivide it for 3 lots, I think, and be very simple. But that 4th lot, just without us setting precedents that we don't necessarily want to set for everybody, it makes it really tough to do.
All right, I'm confused. Okay, for one, we can't subdivide it into 3 lots because y'all's regulations require each lot is 60 feet wide. So
Okay.
you can't re-subdivide it any more than the 2.
3 lots.
Huh?
That's an option.
Yeah, in that
So
case,
let's just assume somebody comes in tomorrow.
then maybe
and-
2 lots is all you can get, you know, 2 houses all you can get out of it. I just
Well,
figured you could probably drop a 1, you could probably make it work because it's not all that far from working. You know, so I figured if you dropped 1, maybe, but I'm not an engineer, so I don't know. But it's just, you know, there are just so many, you know, exceptions that have to be made for this. And do we want to start making exceptions of allowing everybody to cut every magnolia down, and every time somebody comes in with heavy density, do we want to let everybody, you know, start putting parking in public right-of-way and parallel and counting that? You know, I don't know. And that's the difficulty with this, and it's been kind of like peeling an onion. You know, it's not like, you know, and I understand your standpoint. You know, I do developments myself sometimes, and it's a lot of money, you know, to risk out there when something may or may not be approved. And I get it, but, you know, I also sitting here next to an engineer and an architect who look at this stuff every day, and we've got, you know, trees missing and different questions in an area that is the heart of Fairhope, and trees are the heart of Fairhope. And we're talking about taking them down and doing this and doing that, and it's just, you know, do we really want to set precedent to doing that just so people can get, you know, this would look a lot nicer with 3 probably. But I understand the prices that people ask. You've got to do certain things to make the numbers work, and maybe if the numbers don't work, people don't need to pay quite so much for the property. I don't know, but they're just, to me, I like the project, but I don't like, a lot of the precedents that we'd be setting to approve the project.
Well, let me ask you this, okay, so it's zoned for all kinds of things. Hotels, everything. You could come, so you keep talking about the condo thing. I mean, by right, you can go in there and put a two-story office building. It requires no parking. And it's a condo.
No, this is not the CBD.
It's not CBD, so it would require parking.
Okay, well, I'm mistaken on that. But as far as the condo, you can do most anything you want in one large building and condo it up, and you may get 6, 7 condominiums out of it. I mean, the number of condos really doesn't seem to me to have any regard on this. The other thing is, too, the 2 Magnolias, one of them is not in good shape. It's up against the house. The other one is nice. There's no argument there. Anybody can go out there and look at that. It's literally in the middle of that lot. If you did not allow those 2 to be taken down, that lot on the corner of Bayview and Fairhope Avenue would be completely useless. And I don't think that's the city's deal either.
I do have an opinion on that we did share at the tree committee. I think a very viable option is leaving the house. I mean, it's good shape. It's certainly, there's some economics involved that is not weighing into my opinion. I have that luxury. But there's a second residence on the site. I think both trees could be saved if that was done, whether that got turned into a bed and breakfast or 4 units. With the existing, maybe the garage could be turned into a 4th unit, the resident in the back, and then 2 in the historic house. That could turn into 4 short-term rentals right there. So we look at what can be done on the property. The house is currently across the property line, historic line. This has been used as one lot since 1906. Is there alternatives to that? And I do not, I'm not opposed to this plan, and I do. Told Trey, I mean, his end result looks good, but is there an alternate to this plan that could save those trees? And I think there is, from someone that doesn't have to think about the economics of the property or the project. It is hard to evaluate something when we don't get everything on the front end. It's hard for us in a 5-week period to juggle the reviews we have, because we have 4 utilities with multiple people and multiple opinions to garner. Public Works has drainage, landscape requirements. Eric's got some fire codes and building codes. I mean, we struggle a little bit to get everything when we have everything with an application. We're in this meeting now and still don't know some of these answers. That's a little bit of the precedent I think we do risk creating by basically saying we don't have to have all those things at the application. I am concerned with that.
But the tree issue is absolutely not correct, Hunter. Everything we submitted with the trees was 100% correct. We have not left anything out. I've already explained to you that the surveyor went out there and they didn't measure it. They didn't measure up to the 20 inches. That's why they're not there. And I'm agreeing to leave them. The other thing is, I understand it's a lot of work. And Lee, you were at the same meeting that I was with. You, Hunter, and Wendy and I, back in November we started this, and I was told a site plan was needed for this. I did a site plan and then was told by the staff, that's not the appropriate method to use it. And I'm like, I spent all that time and money. We lost the contract. I had to go back. I was told an MOP. We have done every single thing and have followed every rule. I do have a preliminary MOP. It is there. It's exactly what y'all's regulations state. There's not one single thing wrong with it. And I just don't understand. And I even met with a couple people, and it's like, yep, I came up here for an informal review, this exact plan. Everybody in the planning commission said, I know it's not a final approval, but everything looks great. And now here I am in, oh, nope, we don't like the project. I'm like, well, that would have been really nice to, I thought that's what informal reviews were about, to say no to. I even asked the same question. Is this a viable project? And every single one of the planning commission said yes. And I have not changed one single thing on that plat except move the driveway to avoid, curve that driveway into the back. It's the only thing that's been changed. And now y'all tell me, nope, terrible plan. I got a problem with that.
It's not a terrible plan. You know, I'm not against it so much. What I want is more of this information that is required. I would like to see, you know, the landscape plan, all of these, you know, we've got 18 conditions here that the staff would like to see addressed.
And it sounds terrible, but read them, and there is just a tiny little note added here and a tiny note added there. I've done that for 30 years, and it's never been a problem.
But I would still like to see them. I understand that, but I'd like to see it in writing. Promises, oral promises don't mean anything.
It does when y'all approve this and said it's approved conditioned upon you putting the sidewalk in. It's approved conditioned upon this. It is in writing, and I have to do that.
We've talked a lot, though, as a body about not getting in the habit of approving things with long laundry lists of conditions. If those need to be
Y'all
provided.
berated me over that.
Yeah, that's,
So,
we've
that's
been
what I'm
talking
here
about
for.
that for a
Yeah.
long time. I think
Yeah.
that's something we've always, and I think, you know, like, I don't necessarily think the whole plan is a bad plan, but again, that's not a precedent we want to set. I have questions on what a drainage plan means without, if you're not tied to the land coverage or the architectural form of the roof area. What is that drainage plan based on? What does that mean?
Yeah, I mean, that's something we can verify. Does the engineer take into account the site plan, 65% coverage, or 75% of the?
It's
The
done. It's
MLP.
signed and sealed. It's a book that thick. I've already submitted it. Every bit of the information's
No,
in there.
I understand. There are just some questions.
See how frustrated I am? It is there. Hunter's saying it's not. It's done.
There's two plans showing different things.
Yeah, and he listed that in his conditions. That was one of our.
Yeah, I mean, there's conflicts. It's
It's if the
could be
drainage plan-
relatively minor, but when you start to add
They
all
add
those, there is a site plan that shows, if you measure those buildings, there's 65% coverage.
Well, we're going back and forth. Let's go ahead and let me open up the public hearing to this point. Does anybody from the public wish to speak to this item? Yes, if you do, just come up and state your name and your address.
Hi, I'm Julie Pate. I live at 10 North Bayview Street. I will be significantly impacted by the construction that they are suggesting. I think it is overcrowded, doesn't begin to describe what I think of this thing. And I am concerned about all of the issues that you all are concerned about. The drainage, there's an awful lot of water that comes that way. And a pretty fountain with some gravel is not going to get it, I don't think. I don't think enough has been decided. I would love, I know it needs to be developed, and I am in favor of that. But I think it needs to be done in accordance with what's already around there. I'm not sure anybody will be able to breathe with 4 houses on that piece of property. I would love to see you all develop it in a way that we can all enjoy, and something that, you know, represents Fairhope in a better light. Thank you.
Anybody else wish to speak to this item?
Hi, I didn't know we were going to be able to speak at this.
You can
but-
pull that down if
Oh.
you'd like. And please state your
Thanks.
name and your address for
My
our
name is
record.
Allison Knight. I live at 50 North Bayview Street. And I didn't realize we were allowed to comment here, but my main concern is always with all these projects that we come to hear about it, is the parking. I think if that small spot requires 8 parking spots, they should be incorporated into the building somehow.
Okay.
And I don't think there should be, personally, I don't think there should
Hey,
be.
just one second, Allison.
Okay.
Sir, if you'll go to the back, I'll tell, could you put the volume up on the microphones just a little bit? And Allison, if you could talk to the microphone, he's having trouble hearing in the back.
Well, he lives right across the street from me. I'll
Yeah.
talk to him later. No, my main
Well,
concern.
he's
I'm
interrupting
just
the meeting
teasing. I'm
asking
just
that, so I
teasing.
just-
I'm just
Yeah.
teasing. The parking is my main concern every time
Okay.
every time we come to it. I don't think that providing 4 parking spots on the grass in front of the house and then having other 4 cars parked in the neighborhood is a good thing to have. So I agree with Hunter. I think to leave the building as it is would be better.
Thank you, Allison. All right, anybody else wish to speak to this item?
My name is Lynn Young. I live in the Bluff neighborhood nearby this development, proposed development. I have several issues. First, I don't even know why we haven't voted on this. If it had this many conditions and this is your protocol to wait until these conditions are addressed, I think we should do what you normally do and follow your procedure. But living in the historic part of Fairhope on one of the standard originally designed lots from the 1900s, there's not room to put 4 houses, four families living on this lot. The issue about the trees, if they're there, they're there. My house in Fairhope is living on top of a magnolia tree that you cannot put 3 sets of arms around. That tree's not going to die. If you leave it alone, it will win the battle against that house. I speak from someone who knows, from a biology background and whatever. I think that it being a historic part of town, this would disrupt the fabric of what this community wants to try to protect. Every time I turn around, there's a house in my neighborhood being torn down. Come live in the historic district, but build a house that you want. So I think if we just start drawing the line to at least retain the flavor of the community, that will be a good thing. Maybe we need to revisit historic designation, but I'm not going to lead that fight because I lost it a long time ago. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Young. Anybody else wish to speak to this item? Yes, sir.
Thank you. First of all, I'll say thank you for not allowing the hotel on site. My name is James Prestwood. I live at 54 Fairhope Avenue, about 1 block west of this proposed development. My 2 issues are, one, of the density, 0.4 acres and 4 what are essentially single-family residences. That's tight. And then the other issue is parking, because we see all the events that happen at the pier and on the bluff. Parking on Fairhope Avenue is a nightmare. And so if we're going to dedicate more parking spaces to residences and more on the side, it's just going to make it worse. So that was my say. Thank you.
So, all right, anybody else wish to speak to this item? All right, in that case, I'll go ahead and close the public hearing at this time and turn the meeting over to commissioners.
I have one question. Hunter, have any of the parking credits, and have any parking credits been issued to any surrounding developments which may take away from these parking credits? Is anybody keeping up with that?
I don't think so. There is not a cumulative, we'd have to go back to look through minutes. I don't know if any across the street or around the bend did. I know, and we never acted on the hotel. That
See
was
what I'm saying?
informal.
Let's say you got a corner, you got 4
No.
corners, and you issue parking credits. We don't have an infinite number of parking credits, do we?
No, certainly not. We don't have, that was.
I'm
part
not
of
saying
the-
any have been used, but it seems like that's a question that needs to be answered.
No, unfortunately, that would require us to go look at minutes of every going back through time. I mean, that's just time where we can do it.
Well, when we originally were looking at parking credits, we weren't so much looking at them for single-family residences. You know, where people are parked all the time, it's more for motel and overflow.
Right.
And,
Yeah,
you know,
well,
they're
and
part-time.
our office issues the right-of-way parking permits it comes through us. So we started to limit it because all the way through the Fruit and Nut, we've had people build as big a house as they can with a rear garage, then want to pave the whole front for parking. But we've got that all over the place. Now, what we started doing was using or requiring impervious surface, limiting how much concrete they can do. In the spirit, this is not dissimilar from that, but at the same time, when you're talking, now there were 4 units that would require 8 parking spaces. The 2 for the ones on the southwest corner are the ones that they wanted to put in the right-of-way, correct? Okay. My biggest thing is looking at it as a building permit. I'm not going to accept an application that's missing 6 different documents that we need to be able to make an accurate assessment on whether or not it meets our requirements. That's the biggest thing I talked to Hunter about, is I don't know, and we've done DRC together, all of the city departments come together. I don't know that I've ever seen something that had half this many conditions, maybe close, but I don't know that I've ever seen one that had this many conditions on approval. And from our standpoint, and I talk to Hunter about it all the time, we tend to be the ones that get stuck having to track all of these conditions, and it becomes extremely difficult to make sure that when you've got this many things that you've got to check before we can issue a building permit or issue a land disturbance permit, there are things that we are requiring based on our regulations that are going to get missed because of how much there is. I drive builders crazy all the time. I want a complete, clean set of documents. I will take a long time reviewing a set, but if you start with a good set of construction documents, it makes the project smoother. And that's when we've got an incomplete application and we're missing this much information, that's probably my biggest heartburn with it, is you can't verify that you're meeting the city regulations if you don't have the information that tells you that they are meeting those regulations.
If I may outline the Planning Commission's options this evening, based on some of these discussions and the overlapping procedures. So first, with the public hearing being open and closed now, the options for the Planning Commission based on deadlines set forth by state law. First, the applicant himself can agree to table this project until the next meeting or a certain time to try to work together with staff to clean up some of these conditions and maybe set forth a project that checks more of these conditions off. If it's a matter of a stamp or a sign, a signature, the applicant can agree to table it, but the Planning Commission cannot unilaterally table this project. It has to act now. Secondly, the Planning Commission can approve this preliminary plat or final plat together as one. It could separately approve as a preliminary plat by itself with certain conditions and deny the request for a final plat. The Planning Commission can deny everything outright. I would just ask, if you're going to deny the preliminary plat and the final plat outright, you specifically state the reasons that you are voting and moving to deny the application. If the project and the preliminary plat are denied, the applicant has 180 days before he could submit a new application or request for this site for approval, unless it works with staff and clarifies all of the deficiencies that were identified in the denial. Does that outline everybody's options? Are there any questions based on procedure for that?
Thank you, Chris. All right, commissioners, any more questions? If not, I will entertain a motion.
One of the options was for me to request a table, and I'll approve that.
Yes.
Let us, we'll table it to next meeting.
Okay.
I understand there's a lot of outstanding issues, but if you really look at it, there's not. There's about 5 or 6. Regardless, I'll shut up about that. But let me ask, but if I'm going to table it and come back, and y'all are going to disapprove this anyway, I'd rather know tonight so I don't have to spend any more money. But I'd have I don't know if this is the appropriate form, but we keep talking about parking. So we added 6, the 3 lots have 2 parking spots each. And the 2 on-street parking are parkings that I added. I'm not using existing on-street parking. Those are the ones I added. So there's still, I'm not taking up any of the city's existing parking. I want to make that clear. And if there's an issue there, but anyway.
Trey, if you don't mind, there is a little bit of a but there's also an easier solution too. On-street parking, whether it's by the applicant or existing, is only giving it a 2-to-1 for it. So to take up 2 on-site parking spaces, you have to have 4 off-site. That same section also allows 5 bicycle parking to accommodate 1 parking space. So it could be those 2, and the bicycle rack, could be enough to accommodate the 2 parking spaces and not get credit for any other existing on-street parking spaces. So just to clarify that.
So I guess that's the deal. I would like to table this, but I'd also don't want to spend any more time or money on this, or y'all's time and money, if y'all were just going to go ahead and disapprove it. If I clean up these little comments, I got to add a comment here and a comment there, and add a note that we're going to put the 2 12-inch trees. That was my fault. I forgot that completely on the landscape plan. But those are all just little notes that have already been worked out. So that's the only thing I ask you to table it. But
And just to be clear, I believe now that the Planning Commission has opened the public hearing and closed the public hearing, the Planning Commission can agree to table it with your agreement to table it, but they don't have to agree to it now that they've opened and closed it. So you could have tabled it before they opened the public hearing or before we went through it tonight without having them weigh in on it. But now that the public hearing's been opened and closed, they now have to take a vote, and with your permission to table it, because timing-wise, that's the only reason they need your permission under the subregs. Timing-wise, they have the ability to table it with your agreement to table it.
all right, well, I have an agreement, and I give you permission to, if that's what y'all would like to vote.
Just to be honest to you, and I can't speak for the other commissioners, they may totally love it. I'm just feeling like there are too many exceptions on the precedent that it just seems too difficult to get there. And, the combination of the density, the on-street parking, the Bayview, side view, the trees, not being able to get there from basically we're trying to do an in-around where we can't get there from a subdivision perspective. There's just a lot of things I don't like about this. It's just, to me, and I understand the price of property in Fairhope, but I just wish this were a 2 or 3 lot. The more I look at it, the more I think it's just going to change the character of that area right there.
Well, sure would have loved to have known that back in November when I met with you.
Well,
and
there were
Hunter.
so
I mean,
many
come on,
things.
guys.
I understand, but
Jeez.
there were a lot of things that have changed since November too, of the design and how it was laid out. It wasn't exactly this at that time.
Yeah, it was. Anyway, whatever. This is enough time to argue with about
But-
that.
but
But
I
yes,
don't-
it was.
I don't
What we
know.
submitted was this exact plan, except the driveway was changed. That was it.
It's actually 6 units. And
No, it was another lot added to it, so it was.
And I
not
do
this-
want to, it's a good point, because I think a lot of people come to us with a 1-page plan and say, hey, can you approve this? Do you recommend this? The reason for all of these pages in these regulations are making sure we're vetting all of the goals. It's hard to do that when we get 30 minutes with 1 page.
And there's a lot of this I like. Trey,
Yeah.
you do a good job. There's just so many precedents we set on this, and that's such a, high-profile area. But
Well,
that-
you're only one vote. I
I'm
don't know
just
how
one
everybody,
vote.
but, I did go through that meeting with y'all, and it was fine. I went through informal review, the same guys here, that was fine, and that's just not the way you do something. So anyway, and my plan is not any different. Originally, it was 6 because we added a whole nother lot. So it's still the 4 same units that was on this existing piece. Anyway, I would like for y'all to table it and let us work through the issues. They're just notes and stuff on a plan, getting an engineer to sign it rather than the surveyor and other issues like that. getting the landscape architect to sign off on the landscape plan. I mean, those are minor issues.
May I, one comment in case you do. The landscape plan is not minor. That is credits. That is not just signing off on this plan. They have to do the work to put that in. There are other requirements of the tree ordinance, and I really want to call out that section to make sure that's done. Tree canopies are mapped. You know, there's everything in that section within the tree ordinance, not our subdivision regulations. Make sure that all of those are done, not just signing off on the current plan we have.
Just a feedback to you, which may or may not, apply when you're looking at this, but it makes me wonder with all this effort, it seems like by keeping these separate, you're sort of destroying more area just to keep them separate, instead of having duplexes or a quadplex or something to get your units with less of a footprint. As you're trying to, if you were trying to work around the landscape.
Well, no, so I understand what you're saying, because you're an architect, right? We built these same footprints over in Mobile, and they work really, really well. I mean, they're very nice. I also developed a subdivision that has 3 to 6 acre lots. So I do a little of everything, so, anyway, so.
Mr. Chairman, I have one question. Back to the sidewalk waiver. I don't know.
No, I'm not asking for a waiver. I'll put the sidewalk in.
You put the sidewalk on?
Yeah, I've already said that. I put the sidewalk.
On Bayview?
Yes.
Thank you, Trade Commissioners. I'll accept a motion, or and the motion can be to approve both, deny, postpone, give a 30-day, hold it over to our next meeting, or approve the preliminary. Plenty of options.
Could you table it indefinitely until the applicant's ready to come back? I mean, you have to say 30 days?
Yes, I mean, he agreed to table it, so I think it's within your purview of
I mean, he
tabling
would
it
have
with
to be
certain
prepared,
conditions.
right?
Still the 30 days or the next
I would
meeting?
not suggest 30 days. If you're going to table it with a time frame, I would suggest the next planning commission meeting, or a specific planning commission meeting in the future.
We can leave it open though, right?
I'm sorry?
We can leave it open. Can we leave the time frame open?
To meet,
Request?
Until they.
well, we'd
it
have to
takes
meet
a
some
couple of months to get a
criteria of
landscape plan.
Okay.
leaving it open until what, just so the record is clear for both the applicant and staff.
I would say until the planning director and the applicant decide that the planning director could place it on the agenda when he feels like they're ready to be put on the agenda, right?
We have time
No,
periods
he
for
needs a
that.
time frame. You need a
There an
definite
expiration
time
We
frame.
have
I would-
expiration
I would
dates
suggest
on
a
that.
time frame or specific criteria of conditions of what you expect to be accomplished before it comes back before you, because there may be a subjective opinion.
Potentially
objective
no later
opinion.
than date?
Well, how about a motion to table it at the applicant's request until the application is complete? Is that acceptable?
That's not a date,
Oh, it's not a date, but
because I mean,
is that,
I would
Don't-
set forth specific details of what you're deeming as
May
incomplete.
may I clarify a little bit for you?
Yes.
Our subdivision regulations require a landscape plan. Mr. Cordy accomplished that. Our tree ordinance requires a landscape plan by a landscape architect. So there's some, playing on what is just a complete application. So, we brought to you a complete application, but technically, I can submit documents that say, here it is, but there's answers. So clarification on what we're missing, what are the critical items to you, I think would help us, or versus what's just a note to be added. I mean, we listed.
30 days, I mean, you can make it until August. meeting.
That's what I was, to be submitted or to be reintroduced on the agenda no later than the August meeting. That gives essentially 60 days to tie everything up or have the discussions that you need to have.
Fine.
I'm okay with that if you go 90.
Be careful
You want
saying
to-
60 days. because
Okay,
it might
fair
be
enough.
61
Just
or
said the August
62.
planning commission. meeting.
Either August or if we want to do essentially 90 days or 3 meetings, no later than the September, which June, July, August, September Planning Commission meeting, it has to be back on the agenda, or would it be withdrawn? Is that the correct term?
Current application.
What's the correct
Would be-
terminology?
Well, and I'm speaking out loud,
Lee,
thinking
didn't-
out loud,
Lee,
would that
didn't we
be,
have
it
like a
comes back
table-
to the
How many days
planning commission
something
regardless?
could be
the application
tabled?
to decide?
I think
They
it has
used-
to come back to the planning commission for a decision.
For a decision.
The
I
question
thought we
would
had
be-
guidelines of
The-
how
We
long
do.
something.
The time frame. We
The
have to
question
decide
would
on a
be-
time frame.
Correct.
And
I
we're
think
not locked into a specific
Allow
frame.
us to go further.
My point is, it wouldn't just
Oh,
disappear.
okay.
It would have to come back, and if it's incomplete at that time, then y'all would have to take another vote on it.
Okay.
And I would be more comfortable giving a little bit extra time, 90 days, whatever the date
Wanted to
is.
say postpone.
It'd be the September Planning Commission meeting.
Just in
That's
case
essentially
there's
90
delays
days.
getting the landscape architect or whatever.
So, just to clarify, if it's tabled, is it the same application if it's substantially different? If in checking these boxes, there's actually substantial changes that need to be made to the plan, is that the same application?
That You're
That's the
seeing,
application we'll be looking at in September.
yeah.
Yep,
I
but
mean, if
if
the
you change
drainage
your plan
moves-
completely from the first application, does that still get to go in, or should you just start
Sure.
over?
Yeah, if it, I mean,
Yes,
if
it
you
does.
tabled something tonight, if we had
All bets are
less
off.
than 30 days, you tabled it, go back and put a new road in, or go back and turn it to 3 units. Absolutely, they can come back and
That's
make
what-
that.
Happens all the time.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm ready.
Okay, go ahead. Yes, sir. How
I
about,
move we table at the request of the applicant, SD 23.19 Bellevue, to be tabled until no later than the September 2023 meeting.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say nay. All right, motion passes to table until no later than the September meeting. No, we have 4.
Do we need a 7th inning stretch? It's the 7th
Not yet.
item.
No, let's blaze through. Let's go.
Get our meeting up.
Let's get excited about some vacant minor subdivisions.
Yay.
Yay. Okay. Okay, the first one is the Johnson subdivision. I'm Michelle Melton, city planner, city of Fairhope, per our instructions.
We know who you are, Michelle.
Okay. We were told we had to say that.
For the public's benefit.
Yeah. Okay. So here we go. Okay, the owner is Ronald Johnson. Millard Austin of Austin Engineering out of Mobile is the authorized agent, and this is for the Johnson subdivision, a 2-lot minor subdivision, which is 0.62 acres, and it's located between Middle Street and Fairland Avenue, east of Mershon Street. It's R2 and it's vacant. That's what it looks like. There's the site plan on the left. And then I put the slide in there from circa 1942, just to let you guys know it hasn't changed since then. That's just how it was originally platted. And this subdivision would meet the minimum lot requirements for R2, which is 10,500 square feet. And it was reviewed according to the subdivision regulations for a minor subdivision, and it checked everything. Some things are not applicable. The drainage, the existing flow patterns are not being changed. Water, sewer, gas, and electricity are provided by the city of Fairhope. There needs to be utility and access easements per Article 5, Section 8 lot standards. There's the excerpt from the ordinance. There's no sidewalks really in the vicinity, so the closest existing sidewalk is actually on Young Street, which is 360 feet away. And as you guys are aware, you may waive the installation of sidewalks in favor of pedestrian access easement. And if so approved, the applicant shall provide a 10-foot sidewalk easement on Middle Street and Fairland Avenue. So this one has some conditions, but they're pretty easy. Just to add a note on the final plat regarding using the then current setbacks at the time the applicant applies for a land disturbance permit in case those were to change. The final plat shall have a 10-foot sidewalk pedestrian easement along both Middle Street and Fairland Avenue. It should also have the 15-foot, those halo easements Hunter mentioned on the rear and sides of the lot. Add the finished floor elevation notes to the final plat. Lots on the plat shall be labeled 13A and 13B. That's just good for posterity so we can follow it. And then the engineer owner shall provide an agent authorization letter, which is some housekeeping. I don't know if anything from Austin is here or the Johnsons. Anyone? Okay.
All right, any questions for staff at this time? All right.
What are the size? Give us a second to answer there, Lee.
Oh, sorry about that.
What is the size of the smaller lot in acres again?
The site data, the smallest lot is 11,262.26 square feet.
Okay.
Yeah.
I did ask for acres, but you can give us.
Oh, yeah, I see. Yeah, well, it is acres, so.
0.25.
Yeah. I use the cheat sheet on that.
We only use acreage on the other side of Greeno, Jack.
That's right.
Well, I like to practice my math.
We have what, our R2 is about broken down by the square feet, not acreage, when you look at the minimum lot area,
I
so.
understand, but I can take the quarter and multiply by 44,000.
Yeah, all right.
Well, I can't.
Any other questions?
Like that.
Any other questions for staff? All right, thank you much. I'll go ahead and open the public hearing at this time. Does anybody from the public wish to speak to this item? Yes, ma'am, come on up. And if you'll
My name
state
is-
your name and address, and you can pull
Yeah.
that microphone
My
down.
name is Sally Burns. I own property on Middle Street. And my only question was, shoot. It's about the water, fire hydrants, thank you. Okay, so will they be responsible for putting in fire hydrants there when they build? If it's not, it's my understanding you have to have a fire hydrant if you subdivide within so many feet.
Correct.
So,
there is a fire hydrant within that many feet, or staff would have had that requirement.
okay, so that's already been
I think, is it within 1,000 feet?
addressed?
450 feet.
450 feet.
Okay, and so
So
there's one
basically,
on
basically,
Fairland?
I believe there's actually one on each corner on.
Yeah.
There's one on the corner of Mershon and Middle, I know that. I just was wondering on the other side if they were
It's
going to
basically
put one in.
150 yards. It's a pretty good distance. And it doesn't matter which street it's on, there just has to be one within 150 yards the way the bird flies.
Okay, all right, that was my question. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. All right. Anybody else have any questions or wish to speak to this item? If not, I'll go ahead and close the public hearing at this time. Commissioners, do I have any further questions? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
I move we approve SD 23.20 Johnson Minor subdivision subject to staff recommendation.
I've got a motion to approve, subject to staff recommendations. Do I have a second?
Second.
All right, go ahead and give that one to Holly. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say nay. That motion passes unanimously. Next item on the agenda, SD 2320. 2321, excuse me, yes.
All right, it's Morphe Place subdivision, 3-lot minor. It's also vacant. So the owner is a single tax and Drexel Booth. Aaron Collins, which is here, of SC Civil, is authorized agent for the project, and it's for the Murphy Place subdivision, 3-lot minor, approximately 0.76 acres, and is located on the northwest corner of Morphy Avenue and Bishop Road. It is R3, and like I said, vacant. That's what we're looking at. That is the site plan of the 3 lots. It's got your acres on there, Jack, so that's good.
Well, I asked earlier because I saw acres, I didn't see feet on there, so I was trying to convert it. I was really wanting to
Which-
just read what was on the paper.
We don't want Jack to have to take his shoes off and do that.
Okay. So there you go. The smallest is 0.22 acres, largest 0.31. Total 0.75. Okay, so Morphe Place already exists in the county probate records. I'm not sure if it actually exists at all. I mean, if for real, but it's in there, so it's one of the things we check, so it's not confusing for us later on down the road. Signature block needs to be planning commission instead of planning director. No big deal. Finished floor elevations need to be noted on the final plat for each lot. And then a fire hydrant is located on Morphe Avenue across from Lot 3. And all 3 lots meet the minimum lot requirements for R3, which is 7,800 square feet. So it's kind of congested there, as we are aware. So for traffic and safety reasons, the applicant is required to, and has agreed, to install the driveway on the upper 1/3 of Lot 3 off of Bishop Road, not Morphe, and a note reflecting access restrictions shall be added to the final plat. And this is minor, and it was reviewed accordingly, and some things just weren't required. Again, the drainage flow, the existing flow patterns are not being changed. For utilities, water, sewer, gas, and electricity are provided by the city of Fairhope. There will need to be additional transformer, but it will most likely be placed on a utility pole in the right-of-way at the intersection of Bishop and Morphe within Lot 3. No poles or guy wires will be removed for driveways per the letter from applicant dated May 11th, which is in the packet, I believe. The final note shall note the required 15-foot utility drainage easements on the rear and sides. That's what it looks like. So you can see there's a lot of activity with the poles that are there and guy wires. So for connectivity, there is an existing sidewalk along Bishop Road, and the applicant is aware and has acknowledged in written correspondence that a sidewalk will need to be installed on Morphe Avenue, and the plat also has a 10-foot utility pedestrian easement in place along Morphe. So we do recommend approval with the following conditions: change the name, add the utility drainage easements, change the signature block per the report, add the FFEs for each lot on the final plat, and add a note that access to Lot 3 shall come from the north 1/3 of the lot adjacent to Bishop Road or any joint agreement with the owners of Lot 2, which is the middle one, and to install those sidewalks along Morphe Avenue. Now I'm here and Aaron's here too.
Any questions for staff at this time?
Did Fairhope Single Tax have to approve this as well?
No. Fairhope single tax, and I'll just say this, it hasn't been brought up in a long time. As president, the secretary and I, at single tax, sign any application that comes up, regardless. Single tax is totally neutral on any subdivision, any zoning. That's all up to our lessees. So if they bring us something, whether we love it, hate it, think it's a great idea, think it'll pass, or think it'll fail, we just carte blanche, put our signatures on it. They go in our bins and we sign them. So there's just a spot on there. The only reason that we sign those is for the banks to dot the i's and cross the t's to meet all the municipal and bank regulations. Yes, sir.
How y'all doing?
Good thing.
Aaron Collins, SE Civil. I'm really here just to answer any questions. We've pretty much agreed to all the staff recommendations, and we have no problem adding any additional items to the plat that are
Okay.
requested there.
Thank you. Did you lost the toying cost with Larry to who had to stay to the end of the meeting?
I lost.
Okay, thank you. I'll go ahead and open the public hearing at this time. Does anybody from the public wish to speak to this item? I don't see anybody from the public here. Well, we have one person from the public here, but in that case, I'll go ahead and close the public hearing at this time and turn the meeting back over to the commissioners. Hunter and I I'll just mention one thing real quickly because I don't think this is the right venue to get into it, but can you put the last picture? One thing that I talked to Hunter about and talked to Rebecca about today, and Hunter and I don't always agree. I think we'd probably be pretty much in trouble not to approve this, even if we, didn't like it because it meets the subdivision regs, as they stand. But one issue that I look at that I kind of like to get, Rebecca's input from maybe at the next meeting when we don't have as long of an agenda and for us to think about, is if you look at the Bishop Road, all of the lots are going to face Bishop Road, so they'll have a 35-foot front setback on Bishop Road. Now, if you were to have a lot face Morphe, then Morphe would have a 35-foot setback. But since these are aligning Bishop Road, Morphe will only have a 20-foot setback. So you get into areas where maybe on Morphe, you've got houses all the way along. I'm not talking about this specifically, but this is something that comes up a lot, comes up in the fruits and nuts area, when people come in and do subdivisions. And, I think we probably ought to consider, just make sure that we understand what we're allowing when we approve these, that we don't want to make any changes, that, if you have an area where somebody faces Bishop Road, but then you have a lot of houses up on Morphe, you have nice houses with 35-foot setbacks, and then right next to them, 15 feet out further than their nice house, you've got somebody's garage, with some metal screening and, a couple motorcycles stored over there on the side, right next to the front of their house. So, as we have really been, anybody that says it's difficult to develop in Fairhope has never gone many other places to develop. We have tried our best to help people, and I think sometimes, we pay for that when we listen to, allowing people to develop their lots and the fruits and nuts that are set up for cottages so big that they can't even park on their own property and have to park on right-of-way. And we just open ourselves up to this, over and over. And when we subdivide in the fruits and nuts especially, or other areas, and we're allowing people to put garages in what would be the setbacks of their next door, neighbors, area, is that how we want to develop property in the future? And again, this is not, I don't think, the forum for that. I think as far as the subdivision regs are written currently, this, meets every criteria, and hopefully whoever develops that property will want to be off of Morphe and do something that's attractive there. But I just wanted to mention that, and maybe, Rebecca can, bring us some items, or, Hunter can say what maybe some other municipalities do in this particular type of a case.
I do want to ask, and not a condition we're proposing at all, but that lot is wider, so Aaron, if you wouldn't mind just checking with the property owner, see if they're willing to increase the setback. We can plat that if they're willing to, so maybe they don't want, to be on the road. We'll help facilitate that if.
You talking about?
On the Morphe side.
Having a
little
front
bit larger
setback.
setback. Yeah, that's not a condition at all, but, just something to ask them, kind of lines our streets up better.
But eventually there'll probably be a light there. That traffic right now, that Fairhope Avenue is blocked. It was all the way blocked to County Road 13 from, the traffic was backed up from County Road 13 when I drove by there at 2:45, even before school let out. And on the one hand, that's exacerbated that Fairhope Avenue's blocked, but on the other hand, there's nobody coming at that. Imagine how bad the traffic would be if the roundabout was open, 1 block to the south.
One of the other, the sidewalk is going into the property, so at the same conflicts that Eric was talking about earlier, where if you were to have a 20-foot driveway going right into a garage, now you've got a sidewalk crossing it, parking there would be a conflict with the sidewalk, so, there's some logic to it, but, we'll look at that kind of. And then kind of what we talked about, it's happening for that maybe is out of the bag. Now as we're seeing more, big lots divided, it may be in other areas, it may be something to consider and discuss in the future.
Yes, sir.
I had another question. So you mentioned sidewalks. I saw that staff recommendation is to place sidewalks along Morphe, but not along Bishop?
There's already a sidewalk.
Oh, is there one there?
Yes, sir.
Okay, awesome. Yeah. I don't want to miss an opportunity.
Yeah, that was a single tax project about 4 years ago that George Roberts did, and that's
I
one of
thought I
the,
remembered that, but I
that's one of the
couldn't
most
see it.
used sidewalks in, with school kids twice a day.
Yeah.
Yep.
Commissioners, any other questions? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
Just not to belabor it, but I thank y'all for bringing that up, and I think there's a good opportunity for us to improve. The whole side street setback makes sense if it's a primary street and a side street, but if they're both primary streets, it's a little weird to have the house shoved up against it. It's a good opportunity to improve our regulations in the future, not with this one, unless they want to voluntarily do something.
Yeah. Thank you. All right. Anybody like to make a motion?
Can we see what item it is?
SD 23.2.
Thank you. I'll move that we approve SD 23.21 Morphe, with staff conditions, including the new name.
All right, I've got a motion to approve, subject to staff conditions, also adding the new name. Do I have a second?
A second.
Okay. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say nay. Motion passes unanimously. Last item on the agenda, SD 2304. This is the Clump PUD out catty-cornered from Walmart, I believe.
Good evening. So this is the Clump subdivision, part of the Clump PUD. The applicant is GMC. We have Mr. Hutchinson with us this evening. Preliminary plat approval for a 15-lot subdivision. A little brief history on the property was it was annexed and zoned as a planned unit development in November of 2019. Later amended that PUD in 2021. The November of 21 preliminary plat approval was given. However, that same PUD ordinance number 1708 was further amended, which created ordinance number 1764. The changes that were made were substantial, requiring a new preliminary plat approval. And this subdivision must substantially conform to the approved site plans. On the site, it's located in between Fairhope Avenue and Gaver on the west side of Highway 181. This is the ordinance as stand, the site plan that goes with every planned unit development. If you'll recall, the previous version had another entrance that came out onto 181. After discussion with Planning Commission Council, it was recommended to have the entrance actually connect to Gaver, eliminating the one on Highway 81. There is some constructed wetlands on the northern side of the property, which is the right side of your screen, and we'll go into more detail on that in a few more slides. A copy of the plat, again, where the wetlands are located on the northern side, the right side of your screen, is also without the wetland buffers, floodways, and areas that go through there. So the utilities, any connections or work that is done in ALDOT right-of-way will require permitting from ALDOT. Utilities within Fairhope right-of-way will require permitting from the City of Fairhope Building Department. Water is provided by the City of Fairhope, and the final construction plan shall be approved by the Fairhope Water and Sewer Superintendent, including potential aid to construction cost, and all materials shall meet the current versions of the City of Fairhope standard specifications for constructing sanitary sewer facilities and water facilities. We know there are some conflicts. For example, on the screen, there's a proposed sidewalk along Fairhope Avenue, which is placed on top of the 14-inch water main. The sidewalk may be need to be adjusted. That'd be something the Water and Sewer Department can get into discussion with at that time. Sewer is provided by the City of Fairhope, and again, the final construction plans be approved by the Water and Sewer Superintendent. On the screen is Lot 12. That is actually the location where the new lift station will be located, and that parcel, that lot deeded over to the City of Fairhope. Power is provided by Baldwin EMC. Gas will be supplied by Fairhope. Total gas loads for the project have yet to been determined, and the applicant is coordinated with the City of Fairhope Utilities, and telephone communications provided by AT&T. Traffic study was completed. Again, as I said, we've already had one preliminary plat that was approved. This slightly changed the arrangement of streets, one adding the access to Gafer, eliminating the one off of Highway 81. The traffic study did consider all three units, the 15 commercial lots, a 233-unit multifamily housing, which is in the center, and then the 50-unit senior adult housing area, which is on the northwest corner of the property. Uses were based off of our B2 general business district, and that traffic study actually limited those a little bit further, and the table is included for reference as well. Neil Schaefer provided an executive summary supplementing the traffic study and that information, highlighting that no improvements were right now scheduled for Gayfer Road extension, with the exception of if a very high traffic generator business, such as a gas station, was to go on one of those corner properties. And during our site plan review, each lot, the applicant will be required to demonstrate compliance with the estimated traffic counts and could require additional improvements, and a new traffic study may be required. That's table 4.1, listing out what was reviewed during that traffic study. Drainage, site is mildly sloped. Currently, the storm water travels under Highway 81 through existing pipes. We do have a master drainage plan, which the individual lots they are going to tie into that main stormwater system. Again, when we do our site plan review, that is another item that will be reviewed. The applicant at that time for each individual lot will be required to have engineered information showing that it meets this master drainage plan going into it. Our O&M plan, we've discussed that this evening on another project, but that recorded O&M, there's a high probability that it'll have to be re-recorded and amended, particularly for lots 7 through 9, as alterations to that drainage plan could occur or additions to that drainage network. Drainage for Unit 2 and Unit 3, when those are developed, will be reviewed at that time again. Some of the drainage, we do have another conflict with the sidewalk. Initial staff's comment was there was a drainage swell on your left side. The plans we received in April, our comment was how was the sidewalk going to be located on the side of the ditch? Well, the swell was removed and the water rerouted. There is still a drainage structure located on top of the sidewalk. So that conflict will need to be resolved prior to construction. Landscaping was reviewed during the PUD as well as this case, and at the time of final plat, the horticulturalist will verify that all street trees and landscaping meet the approved plans. Landscape plans did omit stabilization near the detention area, which require sod, and no landscaping is currently proposed around the south detention pond. As I mentioned, the site does have an area of constructed wetlands. There's an image on the right hand of your screen, was also the full image included in your packet. The initial plan met the general criteria. The constructed wetlands will also act as a detention. There's a section in the O&M for the maintenance of the constructed wetlands. Currently under review is the Wetland Resources Environmental Consulting, or Wetland Resources, and that approval shall be made conditional based upon this review. We had one review of that was completed, required some revisions, so those revisions are what are being reviewed again at this time. But any final plans will be further reviewed also at the time of permitting for their wetland permit through the City of Fairhope Building Department. We also need a detail for proposed boardwalk need to be submitted and approved. Some general comments. The plans show a temporary sediment pond on lots 7 and 8 to be utilized during construction, but that will be removed prior to final plat or after stabilization of the site as directed by the building official. As I mentioned, a mandatory site plan review is required for each lot per the PUD ordinance 1764. Detailed review for utilities, drainage, traffic will occur for compliance at that time. Staff does request a new digital submittal package containing the following. Those are some of the items that do have some minor modifications, and we want to be sure that we, at the end of the day, have a clean copy of everything as is, so we're not going back through multiple edits trying to find them later. So staff recommendation is approval with the following conditions. A handful of these items are notes for on plats. I will run through these real quick, and if there's any questions on any of them as I get to them, please do stop me. So one, the traffic improvements or drainage improvements recommended by the traffic study are installed by the developer prior for application to final plat. Drainage updates per Neil Schaefer request shall be provided prior to the building permit application, and that is any permit for the site. Approval for the constructed wetland north detention is subject to any recommendations or modifications that come from the third-party review by Wetland Resources, which is like I said, again, been reviewed once. My changes have been made. This is the final review. The final placement capacity and aid to construction cost for all utilities shall be approved by the respective superintendent, and they shall be determined prior to the application for building permit. 5, all sidewalks and street trees are required to be installed prior to the final plat application. 6, uses in Unit 3 shall be limited to those specified within the TIS. Revised TIS may be required. 7, all existing buildings and structures must be removed before final plat application. 8, the landscape island inside the roundabout shall be shown and labeled common area on the plat with a note that clearly states the owner is responsible for maintenance. 9, revise note 6 on the plat to read PUD ordinance number 1764. 10, provide a sidewalk handicap ramp detail at time of building permit to be reviewed and approved. Truncated domes shall be wet set. 11, correct the O&M plan to reflect a 5-year inspection schedule prior to recording. 12, the schematic layout of sidewalk has known conflicts and shall be resolved prior to the submittal for building permit. The engineer of record shall monitor construction and ensure additional sidewalk conflicts do not arise or are remedied in a way that still complies with ADA. Any changes shall be designed by the engineer of record and submitted for approval by the city of Fairhope. 13, revised site plan to show where boardwalks will be in place instead of sidewalks and include a detail for the proposed boardwalks to be reviewed and approved by the city of Fairhope. 14, revised landscape plan to include landscaping inside near the detention pond. 15, add a map of the north and south drainage basins to the drainage narrative. 16, the new digital submittal package containing the items referenced under general comments. Now, I understand that these are 16 items that are on this list.
Same argument y'all made earlier.
It would be similar argument. However, with this being a PUD, there are items that need to be specified in the conditions when we go back to look at final plat to ensure conformance with that PUD plan.
And then there's also federal and state permits that are required. So some of these are just making sure, like ALDOT, we get a concurrence letter. There's wetlands that does require outside core permits. So there, and it's an 80-acre mixed-use development, not 0.4 acres with 4 homes.
Our utility reviews have 10 standard comments that are on all of those, kind of as a, to the applicant, to the engineer, to us, don't forget that these are things. The note on here that the street trees and sidewalks have to be placed, that's in our subdivision regulations.
Yeah,
But it's an item
yeah,
that,
we got that. We got to move on. I mean, I get it. I mean, this crap can't be done until they can't go out there and build the sidewalk. This is memorializing it for y'all. We get it. All right.
it's for us and it helps more
Yeah,
later.
it's great.
We get
No,
blocked.
I've got no problem with that. So we don't need to talk about it 30 minutes now. We've got to
Any
go on and
questions?
talk about our legal stuff here.
Any other questions?
Any other questions?
No, I think it's good to put them in the public
I
record
agree.
after we made such a.
No, I agree. I think it's great to put it in there, but we don't need to talk about why it's in there for 30 minutes.
Any questions for staff? And like I said, Mr. Hutchinson is here available for GMC.
All right. Thank you very much. Glad you could find our place. It's been so long since you've been here before. Do you have anything you want to add to that, or did we get it detailed pretty good of these 16 items and everything
I will
else?
say my name, Scott Hutchinson with Goodwin Mills and Kaywood. Glad to be here and see you guys. And thank you, Mike. Very thorough.
Yes.
Excellent. Makes our life a lot easier when they're that thorough. So I appreciate all the work they do. I know it's a lot to review on a site this big with so many. It's not just the size of the site. It's just it's heavy duty. It's not just residential lots. It's individual commercial lots that are going to have more reviews down the road. So if you have any questions, I'll be glad to answer them. But thank you.
Any questions at this time? All right. Thank you, sir. I'll go ahead and open the public hearing at this time. All right, we got the one. We got 100% participation on our final item tonight. That's pretty good.
Gary Gopher, 300 Lincoln Street, Fairhope. Just some, these are not specific to the approval of this or not, but this is some things to think about. I had an occasion to meet with all the school administrators in the Fairhope Public School District, And when I mentioned this particular project coming up, they were really kind of unhappy with the fact that they almost never get information about the impact that this kind of growth has on their schools. So maybe we ought to think about how it is that we can, at what point and how do we notify the public school system especially, but maybe some of the other schools, that they're going to be impacted by the growth and the development in Fairhope as a matter of courtesy, and so that they can plan for these impacts on their school systems. Related to that, this development is within a mile of one of our elementary schools. So there will be a need for some kids to walk or to bicycle. And we need to take some action to determine that how we're going to provide for safe routes for school. And so that the city ought to take some leadership role in pulling together that kind of a project effort when something like this happens. The other aspect is the school busing. Buses, I think, for the high school and middle school and for elementary school are going to have to come up and do a substantial pickup and delivery operation. I don't see that this has been a part of the plan for the development. And again, it's something that really we ought to coordinate in advance with the school. The last thought was that regarding the traffic studies don't provide any information about pedestrian or bicycle traffic. And this is going to be at a red-hot intersection. You got Walmart, you got all the folks live in a catty corner, and so on. I anticipate a lot of people wanting to come and go on foot or maybe on a bicycle. So quantitative planning for what are going to be the pedestrian crossing facilities and capabilities, and just how it's going to manage what kind of equipment and technology is most appropriate for the demand on this intersection, is going to be just a matter of guesswork by AlDOT or somebody. It's not going to be properly engineered or planned. And that's a weakness in the way things are done with that aspect of things.
I tell you this, Bay Minette absolutely gets the numbers. Whether they get the numbers back to their principals, I don't know, but Bay Minette tracks it very, very carefully, and they know the numbers of everything everywhere. And the other thing, the sidewalk across the street on Fairhope Avenue was another single tax project that predates me, and it's interesting, that backs up to, Idlewild, and that's probably the least used sidewalk in Fairhope. I drive it probably once a day, that Fairhope Avenue, at least every other day, and I think I've seen 3 people on that sidewalk in my lifetime. But some good points, and thank you.
Yeah, Gary, do you know of any municipality, do you have an example of somebody doing good pedestrian studies, like a parallel to a traffic study? I've never seen something like that. It would be great if there was a precedent.
The only things that I'm vaguely aware of have to do with complete streets activities, with smart growth, so on and so forth. So
Okay.
Other cities have done very successful projects along these lines. Fairhope is still in the queue.
Thank you. All right, I'll go ahead and close the public hearing at this time, since we have nobody else in the public to speak, and turn the meeting over to commissioners.
It's preliminary, right?
Yes, it is. Yeah. And this will not go to city council. This is just basically the kind of first round on the subdivision, so the final will come back here as well.
I want to go to that fast food restaurant there because the traffic count shows that one car will exit there during the peak hour every 10 seconds. He did that calculation. What a joke. Every 10 seconds, I'm going there. It's got to be quick.
Well, if that's true, then it's a Chick-fil-A. Because if it's Chick-fil-A, it's probably every 5 seconds. If it's a McDonald's if it's a Wendy's, it'll be every 2 minutes, you know. But if it's a Chick-fil-A, that might be on the low side. All right. If no more questions, I'll accept a motion.
I do have one other comment.
Yes,
Hunter
sir.
and I talked about it. One of the things, they're doing a fairly detailed constructed wetlands on one of those lots. So we have sent that out for a third-party review, but we have not received that review back. The only thing that we want to verify is it'll function. The question's going to be the size of it. So lots 1 and 2 are going to have to be open-ended until we get that report back, because if for some reason it has to increase, then that road may have to scooch back and it may have to intrude more into Lot 1. We don't know that until we get that review back. So I just want to make sure that you understand that we're hoping that's not the case. We just don't know for sure until we get that report back. But that is a possibility, no matter how
So just to
little it might be.
clarify, you've got the constructed wetlands to satisfy the Corps, you know, for replacing a wetlands that's being disturbed.
And the city. And the city.
So your review is for the stormwater treatment.
Well, it's the treatment
aspect.
and it's the capacity of, because we're using the wetland to some extent for capacity, and we just want to make sure that the constructed wetland plan fully meets all of the city regulations. It's a complicated thing they're proposing.
So number 3 needs
Are
to
you
be
comfortable,
more
are you
detailed?
comfortable with number 3
needs
in
to be a little
the
more
recommendation that's on the screen in front of you?
Yeah.
Or do you think something needs to be added?
No, the only thing, yeah, I just wanted to make sure, I guess I wanted Scott to know that it could possibly impact both lots 1 and 2 if that has to grow a little bit or something has to change in that. I just want to make sure you're aware of that, you know, that it could potentially, we're hoping not, depending on that review, but I wanted to make sure he knew that.
Okay.
We already met Gina out there.
You did? Okay. Okay. Okay.
All right, excellent. Thank
And
you,
the
Aaron.
other thing, Jack, too, so you know, because I made the comment about an incomplete application last time, counting up on here, there's basically, I counted 4 items that were corrections to documents we have already received. Everything else is conditions that you have to follow the TIS, which has been submitted. To me, it's a different situation, and I don't mean any offense to Mr. Cordy on that, but this is corrections to documents we have, not documents we do not have.
And it's actually also, one aspect of this is instructions for future staff. Some of these
Right.
lots may not be developed for 20 years.
Yeah.
And there's clear instructions, okay, here's, key, look at a traffic study. Key, look at, you know, so that's why it's there.
Good point.
So you understand.
All right. If no other questions, I'll entertain a motion.
I move we approve SD 23.04 Clump PUD, subject to staff recommendations.
Do I have a second?
I will second.
I've got a motion and a second to approve subject to staff recommendations. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say no. Motion passes unanimously. We have been requested by our attorney, thank you, Scott, to have a confidential session to discuss a legal issue.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, at this time pursuant to Alabama law, Alabama Code 36-25A-7, subsection A3, it's my recommendation to the Planning Commission to rise from your June Planning Commission meeting to go into executive session to discuss pending litigation. It would be my, this oral declaration I'd request be included in the minutes of the meeting for us to rise, and my verification that the discussion during that executive session would be consistent with Alabama law to discuss pending litigation. I do not anticipate any action needed to be taken after the executive session.
And are we supposed to make an estimate for how long it'll be? Or,
I don't think it'll be very long.
okay. And we will come back in, but just, just to close the meeting, so. All right.
But you do need to take a vote.
Oh,
I move to go in executive session.
do I have a second? All in favor, say aye. Aye. And which room are we going into? I'd like to go ahead and recall our meeting back into order.
I move we adjourn.
Do we have enough?
A second, and then there's.
I have a motion, a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. 5's enough, right?
Okay.
We just adjourned. Y'all wanna